Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Drunk Agile. With us, as always, is, in her styling new jacket,
Yeah.
Nisha. Hi. That's what everybody comes to see Nisha. We just happen to be here too. The we in this case is, of course,
Prateek Singh.
Prateek, and my name is Gianni Vacanti. Thank you so much for joining us. Prateek, what are you drinking?
I'm killing off this bottle. This poor bottle has been putting it out of misery. The Abuna, and it is 61.5%, so below our threshold.
Oh.
And it's a Spanish Oloroso sherry butts, mature.
Yeah. Moment of silence, because wasn't like one of our very first Drunk Agile episodes?
This is probably the third of those bottles.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Okay, maybe we'll edit that one out.
It's a Drunk Agile original, yes.
Yeah. And me, yes, I'm still working my way through my Blair Athol wine cask, 55.8%. It's summer in Florida, so unlike Prateek, it's harder for me to find excuses for when to drink whiskey. But I'm really looking forward to killing this one. I'm kind of saying like this is a bad bottle. It's actually quite a good bottle of whiskey. But I've got so many other ones that I want to get into. That hopefully we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks. All right. Now, cheers, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us. Now for the main attraction. Far be it for us to do shameless plugs on Drunk Agile about the things that we work on and the things that we do, but hey, whatever. As most of you know, Prateek and I work as part of an organization called prokanban.org. And one of the big things about ProKanban is to deliver accessible training. How do people learn about flow in general? Our most popular training, because it was our first training, is something called Applying Professional Kanban. I should know this. Applying Professional Kanban. And the thing about Applying Professional Kanban is it's based very heavily on the Kanban guide itself. So if you go to kanbanguides.org, I think all of this is going to be in the description. Go to Kanban Guides, you can read about the Kanban guide. And the thing about it is nowhere in the Kanban guide, and this is on purpose, nowhere in the Kanban guide and nowhere really in APK do we use the word team. Right? If you look at those documents, you don't. Applying Professional Kanban, or APK, is meant to be an introductory class. And so I think a lot of people go in assuming that it is for a specific team or for at the team level. But that's not necessarily the case, even though it's a reasonable assumption, I think, to make going in. And certainly if you go in as a team or go in thinking about it at the team level, you very much will be successful. Having said all that, coming out of the APK, then, one of the most common questions we get, if not maybe the most common question we get, is, okay, well, what if you want to do flow that is for, across multiple teams, or outside of the team's control, or at different levels of the organization, or whatever. And so those questions have been answered in the form of a new class that prokanban.org is offering called Applying Scaled
Portfolio Kanban.
That one. ASPK. You can find all this info. You can find the right names on our website. And so we want to spend a little bit of time talking about that class and why that class is important, why it's needed, maybe potentially how it's different from other scaling, methods or frameworks you've heard of. Although I'm not sure how much we'll get into that. If anybody has some questions, maybe we can do a follow-up episode on that. So Prateek, start us off. ASPK, what is it and why should people care?
Yeah, ASPK, as Dan mentioned, is a response to, we have all these Kanban classes, and people go into them thinking about them as team-level Kanban classes. Now, when you take those exact same concepts and apply them at a higher level where it applies to the entire org, and you create a Kanban board for the entire org, there are certain challenges that pop up, which are similar yet different from the challenges at the team level. And this class is more of a workshop trying to both expose the potential challenges that come up when you try to apply Kanban to an org, and help you work towards solving some of those challenges.
Well, so if you can clarify for me a little bit, because we talked about a single team, Kanban for a single team, and you just talked about Kanban for the whole organization. Does ASPK talk about anything between those two extremes? I mean, if I'm not ready to do Kanban for my whole organization, can I still do ASPK?
Yeah, ASPK is absolutely. I'm gonna use the metaphor now, and then we'll come back to it. It's turtles all the way down. The ASPK is any point of time when you're saying, "Hey, I've got a few teams working on something, and I want to see them and see them on a single portfolio board." ASPK will help you. It could be 2 teams, it could be 20, it could be you have an intermediate level of the organization or multiple intermediate levels of the organization between the entire organization and a single team. You can apply what we talk about in ASPK to any of those levels, any of the turtles. Kanban boards all the way down. Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably, and like you said, I think we should get into this a little bit more a little bit later, but that's probably the biggest surprise when we start talking about Kanban at scale. It's flow is flow is flow is flow is flow. You know, I really don't. I mean, I do care, but I really don't care what level or of the organization we're necessarily talking about. Well, so let's that scaling or scale word is a bit of a trigger for a lot of people, potentially a bit of a misnomer. I guess there's a lot of baggage is what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of baggage with the scaling word. Should we?
Scaling is a 4-letter word.
So we should talk a little bit about what scale means when it comes to flow. What does scale really mean? And correct me if I'm wrong, but in this class we talk about at least 3 different forms of scaling. Is that correct?
I'm trying to count, but I'm sure since you said at least, yeah, there are at least 3.
At least 3. There might be a 4th one that I can come up with. But shall we talk a little bit about when we say scale? What do we really mean? What are the types of scaling that we touch on in the class?
Yeah, there's a reason the class has scaling and portfolio both in the name, because those are 2 different concepts, and scaling in itself is both a complicated and often misused term. So, Dan, what according to you is scaling?
Okay, so the most obvious one, I think most people think about when we say scale is, okay, how do we take flow for one team and talk about how we get flow across several teams? So I mean, it's 0, 1, or many. Those are really the options that we're solving for. 0 is obviously trivial. 1 is APK. Many is ASPK. So that's really the first scaling is, what if I want to apply flow concepts across several teams? Whether these several teams are dependent on each other, whether they're working on the same or different projects, products, whatever, right? It's like how do we start applying these flow concepts to more than one team? That's the first level of scaling. Prateek, give me the second one.
Yeah, second one is this is where it becomes interesting, because the class is not focused on this, but it is a mode of scaling, which is you as a single team deciding that I'm going to include downstream activities or upstream activities on my Kanban board. I'm going to expand what the start and finish points of my Kanban board are, and start caring about things like helping out with requirements generation, or helping out with operational stuff like pushing code to production. All those things that is another form of scaling, a single team deciding to expand its own boundaries.
Yeah, or how do we validate whether something was valuable
or not?
Because the clarification I think maybe there is when teams come to APK, and when we talk about APK for teams, usually we scope that to, okay, what's under the team's control? Let's do the applying professional Kanban from the perspective of what's under your control. The more interesting questions, I think, are what happened when we start talking about what's outside the team's control.
Yeah.
And this is getting more and more to that end-to-end business agility that everybody talks about or seems to be talking about. At least used to talk about. It seemed to be a much hotter topic than it has been recently.
This is also the one that I think a lot of people don't associate with scaling. They're like, oh, you're just expanding the Kanban. Yes, you're literally scaling Kanban. That is exactly. So
Go
that
figure.
is scale.
Okay, so that's number 2. What's number 3? I think it is my turn. Okay, well, no. So number 3 is what Prateek was just talking about. If you rewind the tape, 5 or 10 minutes ago. What we, how do we introduce flow at different levels, of the organization, so if anybody's familiar with flight levels, this is probably more, you're probably more familiar with this aspect of scaling. How do, as we kind of move up the chain, so to speak, as we move up the turtle stack, so to speak, what does, what does that mean? So this is more, portfolio, this is more strategic, this is more whatever, whatever term you want to use there. I don't know, can you say a little bit more about that? Because
yeah, we're as we're talking about ASPK, what we're really saying is you can apply Kanban at any level, and scaling does not mean you go to the highest level immediately. Scaling could simply be, we are at the team level right now, and our org has departments, and then the larger organization and the business units, whatever they have. Let's go to the immediate org level that's above this team, and go and start there, and then going to the business unit level or the portfolio. Well, what people associate portfolio with, which is the org level after that.
Yeah, but I mean, but portfolio could very easily mean, like we talked about, we've got several teams working on a single product, or we've got several teams working on multiple products, or we've got several teams, right? Whatever, and there's all kinds of permutations, in between that. I mean, I think for the most part that covers all the scaling. We talk about. There's kind of a fourth orthogonal dimension of scaling that I at least like to mention, but I don't know if it's really scaling, but it's really kind of that scaling the team's, depth of knowledge or comfort with execution or whatever, just when it comes to flow concepts. It's like, once you take flow and you start applying it outside of your span of control, there's a whole bunch of interesting learning, I think, that happens that drives, in general, I hope drives better behavior, better decision making, better all of those things. And to me, that's kind of another dimension of scaling that maybe isn't necessarily talked about in the class, but is one that I don't think should be discounted. So this is things like probabilistic thinking, like I said, how to make better day-to-day decisions, how to understand the decisions you make, how they impact, kind of the wider organization, things like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's no limit to how much a team can keep improving, and that's another, the deepening of your concepts is another way to express that orthogonal directional scaling.
Yeah, and it should be clear, we're not talking about a maturity model here. If you want to see our last episode, we're not necessarily
so now here is our new maturity model.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever that learning journey is, whatever path that takes, hey, whatever, it's just you're deepening your knowledge. Okay, so I mean, what else is special about ASPK that we haven't talked about so far?
So ASPK was obviously a response to, hey, we need something. Students coming to us and saying we need something that helps us express this at a higher level. It is also a response to most frameworks and classes that help you express it at a higher level are very, very complicated. It's a very they get very heavy-handed on this is how you do all these things so that they work together. The ASPK is also a response to that to say it doesn't have to be that complicated. Let's let's use the same principles we've already learned and apply them at this higher level and see what pops out, see what are the issues that come up, and let's run through some of these common issues and talk about how we would deal with them. Very often, things that come up are okay, how do we prioritize stuff? How do we pull them in? How do we know that we're working on the right things? How are we aligned to a strategy? Um, can teams collaborate with each other to get stuff done? Those are the things that come up because within a team, these things are easier. These things of we're a team, we work together, we come together for stand up every day. We know how we collaborate. That's not always well defined at a higher level. Um, and most classes and framework, when they try to define it at a higher level, get a little too prescriptive around it. And that's where we try to say, um, let's use the things we already know. Let's use the things we already learned in APK and figure out if that can work for us. And if it cannot, okay, what do we add?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth repeating what what you're talking about. And we've had this observation, I think, a couple times, where people talk about is like, well, ASPK looks a lot like APK, and that's on purpose, right? That's by design. I mean, the only thing that's really changing is context. So let's talk about how we apply those same flow principles that we learned in APK, and how we might handle some of these issues that you talked about, given the different context. But most of the stuff is still the same. We're still talking about all the same metrics. We're still talking about taking a probabilistic approach to planning. We're talking about controlling work in progress. We're talking about moving to just in time as much as possible, for all parts of the process. It's none of those concepts should be brand new to you, and if you go to a scaling class and you're hearing those types of things for the first time, that's maybe that's a topic for a different video, but I mean, there's certainly a conversation that is warranted there. So that's really the point of ASPK is how do we reinforce a lot of these good principles that you've already learned, to make your whole organization much more lean, much more agile.
Yeah, any scaling class, at least in my opinion, should not be introducing new things. Because at that point you're not scaling, you're adding. and by the way, definition of scaling is you multiply something and you're doing multiplication, not addition. So yeah, that's what scale is. Remember scaling a photograph, that's scale.
Okay.
So we're trying to take the same things and helping you apply that at a higher level, like helping use the same concepts and figuring out what are the pitfalls. We've got a lot of knowledge doing this. We've learned from a lot of people and then collected a lot of feedback on all the failures of doing this and bring them to you to go, here are the things that can happen. How would you deal with it? We're not trying to add new things necessarily.
I mean, a final point. I don't know if it's the final point, but a final point we might want to make is we Prateek was just talking about these different frameworks and methodologies. There's nothing to say. There's nothing in ASPK that says necessarily throw out all that stuff too. If you're using some of these other scaling methodologies, by all means, continue to, because some of them actually do talk about lean principles at some of these different levels. It's just hopefully ASPK will help reinforce, maybe bring a little bit more rigor. Maybe that's the better word. Maybe a little bit more professionalism, dare I say, to some of those concepts. So just because you're doing something like SAFe or flight levels or whatever already, there's nothing to say that coming to ASPK and learning about ASPK invalidates any of the learnings that you've had in those classes. So I've taken a shot at a final point. I don't know, is there anything you'd like
I'll just double down on that, and just as we always say, if you're doing Kanban, doesn't mean you don't do Scrum or whatever else you're doing. You can always layer these practices and these things on top of whatever you're doing, and it'll help bring more rigor to it. Same thing here. There are a bunch of practices that we will go through and we'll talk about that you can layer on top of whatever you're doing. It might end up with you removing some of the extra waste that you have, but that is totally up to you and your context to see, hey, okay, now that we're doing all these things, maybe we don't need to do that other thing. But that's completely up to you.
So yeah, I mean, we've probably done our job if you come out of that class with more questions than answers about why you do the things that you do. That's maybe exactly what we want. The final shameless plug for this episode, anyway, not for Drunk Agile, but the final shameless plug for this episode is our first. I'm assuming this will be, actually it'll definitely be our first. I don't know.
Our first for sure.
I don't know if it'll be Pro Kanban's first.
No.
But if anybody wants to learn more about ASPK, Prateek and I will be in London the week of December. I should know this. What is it? December 5th. Yeah, December 5th and 6th. Prateek and I are offering a public ASPK class. So come check it out. Again, I'll try to remember to put that link to the class where you can learn more about the class in the description for this video. So if you're intrigued by some of the things that we're saying, please come along and check us out. We'd love to have you. So I think that's it for today. Nisha has moved closer and closer to the door.
Yeah, so she's dropping some hints about getting out of the door.
So she's like, yeah, you guys have talked long enough. So Nisha's giving us a signal for Nisha. Hi, Nisha. Hi, sweetie. So for Nisha, for Prateek, my name is Daniel Vacanti. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye, everybody.